Senator John Kennedy's questioning here may sound like a folksy cross-examination, but underneath the humor and the one-liners is something much deeper, a conservative attempt to frame years of underfunding, bureaucratic strain, and structural neglect as the fault of the very agencies Republicans have spent years weakening.
Senator Kennedy.
Mr. Secretary, how many employees were there at HHS when you took over?
82,000.
How many do you have today?
62,000.
Okay.
It's about the level it was in 2019, right before COVID.
Is this the first time that an institution in America has ever downsized?
I don't think so. I think private and public institutions have
Microsoft just announced that they were going to reduce their workforce by 6,000 people. You think that'll be the end of Microsoft?
Senator, we wouldn't have reduced anybody.
You think that'll be the end of Microsoft?
I don't think so, Senator.
Meta, I still call them Facebook, just announced they're going to reduce their workforce by 3,000 people. You think that'll be the end of Meta?
I imagine it will not.
Yeah. Think maybe the people at Meta know what they're doing?
I think that they do. They make a lot of money, Senator.
Do you hate NIH?
I love NIH. I grew up with NIH. I visited when I was a boy. I loved science, and those were my favorite afternoons, visiting the labs.
Do you hate medical research?
No, I think we need to lead the world in medical research in this country.
In fact, isn't it true, Mr. Secretary, that you would like to see more money spent on medical research?
Obviously, I'm the secretary of this department. No secretary wants to see his budget cut.
Well, one way of doing that, it seems to me, would be to stop some of the stealing. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Let's suppose you give NIH gives a university $100 million to research, for medical research, to research a cure. And that university takes $30 million of it, doesn't spend it on the research. They use it to subsidize the rest of their university. Does that show a commitment to medical research?
No, and I mentioned before the example of Stanford, which was taking 78% in indirect costs, and we don't know what they were spending.
That's theft, isn't it?
It's not a good
in Louisiana,
way to spend
we call
federal
that
taxpayer dollars.
We call that stealing. Is there any doubt in your mind that a lot of universities are taking this NIH money, which is supposed to be spent on medical research, and using it to fund other parts of their university? Is there any doubt in your mind, Bobby?
Oh, and Senator, the other people who are writing grants, like the Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, they pay 10% to 15% in indirect costs. We were paying 50, 60, 70%.
So, in fact, what you're doing is adding money to medical research.
We will be able to fund many, many, many more studies by eliminating that $9 billion, at least part of that $9 billion cost.
Okay. I want to ask you about LAHEAP. Are you familiar with this GAO report they did on LAHEAP?
I am not, Senator.
They found, they audited 7 states. They found 11,000 dead people getting LAHEAP grants. You familiar with that?
No, but that is pretty typical of many of the other programs that we're working with.
They found prisoners getting grants, didn't they? Were they using the grants to heat their jail cell? They found 1,000 federal employees getting the grants with federal salaries that greatly exceeded the income limits. They found some of those folks living in $1 million homes. I got 18 seconds. Why do we allow highly processed foods in America?
That's a complicated question, but it's driven by profits, but to a food industry that is making money by poisoning American kids, and they don't do it abroad. They make the same products for Canada and for Europe that do not contain many of those chemicals.
When Kennedy opens by grilling the HHS Secretary over staffing levels, he frames the reduction in workforce as some kind of unique crisis. But the truth is that the federal workforce has been stretched thin for decades. Agencies like HHS have been asked to do exponentially more work with fewer people, especially after the pandemic, rising public health demands, and chronic congressional underfunding. Kennedy compares HHS to Microsoft and Meta, but those corporations fire workers to increase profits, not to meet public health needs. The comparison falls apart immediately because a government agency is not a profit-driven tech company. It's responsible for protecting the health of millions of Americans regardless of the financial climate. When Kennedy pushes the idea that NIH grants are being stolen by universities, it becomes clear what he's really doing, turning a legitimate debate about indirect costs into a soundbite about theft. Universities do sometimes overcharge administrative and facility fees. That's a real issue. But the solution isn't to demonize medical research or undermine NIH funding. The solution is transparency, oversight, and modernizing grant structures so that public money is used effectively. The irony is that the same lawmakers who complain about stealing have fought oversight measures for years and routinely slash the budgets that would allow NIH and HHS inspectors to properly track misuse. Then, Kennedy pivots to the GAO report on energy assistance grants, highlighting dead recipients, prisoners, and high-income federal workers receiving aid. Those cases matter, but again, what gets ignored is the real cause: outdated state systems, insufficient fraud detection staffing, and old technology, problems worsened by budget cuts championed by the same people now complaining about program errors. If you hollow out government infrastructure for years, you can't act shocked when the system breaks. The most revealing part comes near the end, when Kennedy asks why America allows highly processed, chemically loaded foods. The secretary answers honestly: profits. And that's the uncomfortable truth. The United States allows additives and processing methods that are banned across Europe and Canada because our food industry has spent decades lobbying to keep regulations weak and profits high. It's not about culture, it's not about freedom, it's about corporate money and political pressure. And what Kennedy leaves out is that it's largely Democrats who push for stronger food safety standards, while Republicans routinely call those standards government overreach. The final moment, Kennedy joking that nothing the secretary does will ever make Democrats happy, is perhaps the clearest deflection. It's easier to paint Democrats as unreasonable than to confront the reality that the secretary is trying to rebuild public health systems weakened by years of political sabotage. It's easier to pretend this is partisan dissatisfaction than to acknowledge the deeper structural issues that require serious investment and political courage. Audiences should take away something important from this exchange. Every problem Kennedy lists is a symptom of decades of policy decisions. If we want functioning agencies, clean food, transparent research systems, and effective public programs, we must stop starving government and then acting shocked when it struggles. Progress requires investment, modernization, and a commitment to something more than political theater. Subscribe if you want more clear, factual, and progressive breakdowns that cut through the noise and expose what's really happening in Congress.